The movie was completely exhausting because Robin never quit. We would do a take 1, 2, and 3. We got it. It's all done. Perfect, done. Except Robin would go, wait a minute, let's try. How about if I come through the kitchen window? So he just went on and on and on.
One conversation changed everything people thought they knew about Robin Williams. Years after his heartbreaking death, Sally Field finally opened up about what really happened behind the scenes, revealing a side of the beloved comedian that people never saw. To the world, Sally Field was America's sweetheart. But behind her remarkable career were painful personal struggles few ever knew about. When her path crossed with Robin Williams, a friendship formed that was far deeper than audiences realized. One revelation changed how many people view one of Robin Williams's most beloved films. So what did Sally Field finally reveal? And why did she wait years to speak out? Her answer is as heartbreaking as it is unforgettable. The painful truth behind Sally Field's smile. Sally Margaret Field was born on November 6, 1946, in Pasadena, California, the daughter of an Army officer and an actress named Margaret. A younger brother named Rick became an inseparable childhood companion, a genuine protector and occasional tormentor in equal measure, later growing up into an accomplished elementary particle physicist, an entirely different path from the one that would eventually define an entire family name. Much of early childhood unfolded inside a grandmother's house in nearby Altadena, a genuine sanctuary filled with an aunt, a great-grandmother, and a grandmother who together created a rare sense of real safety during difficult years spent bouncing between different households. That grandmother had overcome real hardship as well, born to unmarried parents, and eventually raised partly inside an orphanage in the Deep South alongside an older sister. A toughness that shaped an entire family line long before any of this particular story began. That household became a happy anchor point during years that grew increasingly complicated everywhere else. A reliable constant amid constant change happening all around it. A mother's remarriage brought stuntman and actor Jock Mahoney into the family when Field was only 4 years old, a charming, larger-than-life presence that friends and family alike found almost impossible to resist, often described as a kind of real-life Pied Piper leading an entire household under that same spell. Behind that charm, however, sat a much darker reality that would not become fully public until decades later. Described honestly inside a memoir published in 2018 detailing childhood abuse that continued for years before finally ending around age 14. That complicated foundation, equal parts safety and danger, shaped nearly every relationship that followed for the rest of an entire lifetime, a pattern that would not be fully understood or explained publicly until many decades had already passed. An all-American surfer girl role in Gidget arrived around age 18, launching an entire career built initially around cheerful, sunny characters that felt worlds away from a childhood defined by strict, repressive expectations placed on girls during that particular decade. Real emotion rarely had a place inside that household growing up, with anger or tears typically met by a blunt reminder not to look ugly. That same cheerful, funny persona became a genuine survival tool, a clown act covering something far darker still waiting to be explored years later. Instant fame at only 18 or 19 years old brought an unexpected kind of isolation, removing an ordinary sense of simply belonging among other people, almost overnight, and without any real warning beforehand. Every stranger suddenly fell into one of two categories: someone who recognized a famous face, or someone who did not, making an ordinary grocery store trip feel strange and unnatural almost overnight. Trust came slowly and rarely, though genuine comfort eventually arrived through fellow actors and film crews who offered a real sense of family missing elsewhere in an otherwise lonely existence. a substitute family built entirely around shared work rather than shared blood. The Flying Nun followed in 1967, a role accepted only after a stepfather's warning suggested that refusing the part might end an entire career before it truly began. A threat delivered at a brand-new apartment during an especially vulnerable moment. 3 genuinely difficult years followed, playing a character that felt hollow and disconnected from any real acting craft, made worse by an early marriage entered into, around that same period, for reasons that had little to do with genuine readiness or desire on either side. One unexpected friendship changed everything. The actress playing Mother Superior, having noticed real potential hiding underneath an obviously miserable few years on set, invited a curious young star to visit the actor's studio, leading directly to lessons under legendary teacher Lee Strasberg and the true beginning of a serious, lifelong acting career built on something far deeper than sunny television charm. That single invitation, extended almost casually after a normal day of filming, ended up reshaping an entire professional future in ways nobody could have predicted at the time. The years that changed Sally Field. An early marriage to a high school sweetheart arrived under real pressure, entered only after a partner threatened complete abandonment otherwise, not out of genuine readiness for that kind of lifelong commitment at such a young age. 2 sons followed quickly, Peter arriving first and providing a genuine emotional anchor during an especially unstable period spent finishing out a demanding final season on The Flying Nun while pregnant and exhausted, followed by Eli in 1972. Television typecasting made serious film work almost impossible to find throughout the late 1960s and early 1970s, with casting directors refusing even a basic audition based entirely on old assumptions from Gidget and The Flying Nun that had nothing to do with genuine current ability. Rather than blaming an unfair industry alone, daily training continued at the actor's studio, building real craft. One difficult session at a time and refusing to accept that a former sitcom star could never grow into something more substantial, given real time and real effort. That persistence eventually paid off in an unexpected way. Fellow student Jack Nicholson mentioned an undiscovered talent to casting director Diane Crittenden, leading directly to a first real audition in years for a film called Stay Hungry alongside Jeff Bridges and Arnold Schwarzenegger, directed by Bob Rafelson in an early role for the future action star. Landing that small part validated years of unpaid, unglamorous studio work nobody outside that small circle ever witnessed firsthand. That single small role became the actual turning point, separating a former teen star from a serious, respected actor finally being taken seriously by the entire industry. Proof that years spent grinding away inside a small studio classroom could eventually outweigh an entire decade of being dismissed at first glance by casting offices across town. A phone call from Burt Reynolds arrived next, requesting help fixing a script considered genuinely terrible at the time by nearly everyone attached to the production. Filming Smokey and the Bandit in Atlanta in 1977 sparked a relationship that would stretch on for several complicated years afterward. Built initially on real fun and genuine creative chemistry between 2 performers who barely knew each other beforehand. That romance carried real warmth alongside real fear, a pattern later explained honestly as an unconscious attempt to work through the exact same dynamic experienced growing up with a stepfather, capable of both genuine charm and real harm. Reynolds could be wonderful and difficult in equal measure, wanting significant control over a partner's professional choices in ways that eventually became impossible to accept, mirroring an old, familiar shape of love that felt simultaneously comforting and dangerous. Tension peaked directly over the film Norma Ray, a role Reynolds openly opposed due to the character's troubled sexual history, going so far as to throw the actual script in anger during one particularly heated confrontation at home. A script thrown in anger became the exact moment real independence finally took hold, leading straight into a meeting with director Martin Ritt, and a role that ended up defining an entire acting legacy. Playing Norma Ray required genuinely finding an inner strength that had been buried for years, growing stronger scene by scene while learning to physically inhabit a woman who had fought a difficult way out of a controlling environment. That process eventually made walking away from the relationship with Reynolds finally possible for good, closing out one of the most complicated chapters of an entire personal life and opening the door toward a much more independent second half of an entire career. The moment that revealed the real Robin Williams. Norma Ray earned her first Academy Award in 1980, arriving as a complete shock after years spent fighting for basic industry respect and constant doubt from casting rooms across an entire decade of steady, difficult work. Total numbness took over during that speech, remembered mostly as a blur rather than a clear, coherent memory of the actual moment on stage in front of an enormous television audience. An unforgettable after-party followed at the original Spago on Sunset Boulevard, the only real party in town during those years, ending up seated directly between Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn, without managing to say more than a few nervous words the entire night, despite sitting beside two of the biggest legends in the entire industry. 5 years later, Places in the Heart brought a second Academy Award, arriving with an entirely different emotional response the second time around, and after finally learning how to feel a genuine accomplishment rather than simply surviving it in a daze. Genuine feeling finally broke through during that second speech, delivered honestly rather than numbly, closing with a now legendary line about being liked that some listeners badly misunderstood as pure vanity or arrogance. The real meaning behind that moment was closer to quiet disbelief, acknowledging out loud just how hard that particular recognition had been to earn after years of doubt. Essentially, a private conversation directed inward rather than a message meant for the entire audience. 2 Oscars in 5 years transformed a former sitcom star into one of the most respected dramatic actresses of an entire generation, though the most emotionally significant role, in terms of a lasting personal friendship rather than industry recognition, was still waiting years down the road on a very different kind of movie set entirely. Mrs. Doubtfire brought a partnership with Robin Williams in 1993, remembered ever since as one of the most joyful working experiences of an entire career spanning countless film sets across more than 5 decades of steady work. Endless improvised takes became a genuine trademark, with a single scene sometimes stretching past a dozen attempts purely because Williams could not resist trying just one more variation. Take 4 turning into take 5, 6, 7, and beyond, almost every single time the cameras rolled, exhausting and delighting an entire crew in equal measure. Real tragedy struck quietly during production, entirely unrelated to anything happening in front of the cameras that day. A father, already living inside a nursing facility after an earlier stroke, suffered a second massive stroke during filming, arriving as devastating news delivered by phone during a break between scenes while sitting inside a trailer parked right outside the courthouse set built for the movie. A difficult decision followed immediately afterward, choosing not to prolong life support before returning straight back to set for a scene about children being separated from a father during a bitter divorce, a scene that mirrored an entire childhood spent as the child of divorced parents decades earlier. Williams noticed something was wrong almost instantly, quietly pulling aside a struggling scene partner between takes to ask if everything was truly all right. That simple question broke months of held-together composure completely, finally revealing what had actually happened only hours earlier that same day, that a father had just died, and permission had already been given to let that happen. Filming stopped immediately. Williams ended the entire day right there, announcing the crew was finished for the day and protecting space for private grief, rather than pushing through for the sake of a shooting schedule that could easily wait until tomorrow, sending everyone home except a small skeleton crew needed to grab a few final shots of the children. The truth Sally Field kept for years. That kindness on set turned out to run even deeper than most people ever realized at the time, hidden away quietly for decades without a single public mention anywhere. Decades later, contributing to an oral history of an entire career and life, published through Vanity Fair, a story surfaced that had never been shared publicly before, revealing that Williams had quietly reworked the entire filming schedule around that same difficult week, specifically to make things easier without ever announcing the reason why to the rest of the crew or the studio. When Williams passed away in August of 2014 at only 63 years old, an immediate public statement described feeling stunned and profoundly sad, praising a lifelong gift for making other people laugh tirelessly across an entire career, and insisting there would truly never be another performer quite the same. Grief did not fade quickly or quietly with time, lingering for years well beyond that initial public statement released to reporters. Nearly a decade later, during the 2023 Screen Actors Guild Awards, that same grief resurfaced live on camera during a red carpet interview, describing a friendship still filled entirely with love and joy, despite the passing years and the enormous loss underneath that joy. A simple, heartbreaking wish followed immediately afterward, that Williams should still be growing older, right alongside every other surviving friend from that same generation of performers, a wish repeated almost word for word, while accepting a Lifetime Achievement Award that same evening. Only in 2024 did the full weight of that Mrs. Doubtfire story finally reach the public completely, adding one final, deeply human layer to a friendship already widely admired from the outside looking in for decades, proving that even a story told so many times before could still hold one more genuinely surprising piece nobody had ever heard. Steel Magnolias arrived in 1989, remembered fondly as one of the warmest sets an entire career ever produced, filled with genuine friendship among an entire cast of women, including Dolly Parton, Shirley MacLaine, and Julia Roberts, who shopped, cooked, and spent weekends together like real family rather than simple co-workers passing through a temporary job. A third son, Sam, arrived that same year, appearing on set as a 6-month-old baby often held protectively during loud musical numbers. An early exposure to show business that Sam later joked explained an eventual adult life entirely spent around cameras and creative people. Years later, the television series Brothers and Sisters explored a storyline between a mother character and a gay son, played by actor Matthew Rhys, a plotline that ended up carrying real personal weight, given that same relationship already existing at home with a real adult son navigating the exact same territory. Creative input shaped that character heavily, adding authentic detail that only a genuine parent of an adult gay son could realistically provide, writing dialogue and reactions rooted in lived experience rather than pure imagination or second-hand research. All three sons eventually built careers rooted in storytelling, Peter working as a respected writer and showrunner on a major limited series written entirely from start to finish. Eli directing television projects, including recent work alongside Nick Jonas up in Canada, and Sam contributing written work across various outlets and publications throughout the industry. Grandparenting arrived without the instant, effortless joy people often describe, requiring real ongoing effort and consistency rather than automatic devotion that simply appears the moment a grandchild is born into the family. That same lesson learned through decades of complicated parenting applied directly to grandchildren as well. Understanding that real love requires continuous reinvestment rather than a single easy feeling that simply appears on its own without any ongoing effort. A lesson that took an entire lifetime of trial and error to fully absorb and put into daily practice. The woman she finally became. A creative partnership involving son Peter Craig and producer Brian Unkrich eventually led to an early copy of the novel Remarkably Bright Creatures, quickly passed along with a simple suggestion that a mother might genuinely enjoy the story during an early galley review long before official publication. Only a few chapters proved enough to secure the rights, leading toward a film adaptation released in 2026 centered on healing, family, and an unusually thoughtful literary octopus that anchors the entire narrative in genuinely unexpected ways. Reflecting honestly on an entire career spanning more than 6 decades, no clean, tidy summary ever really comes easily, with real perspective typically requiring far more distance than is currently available to properly judge an entire body of work. Work continued anyway, including preparation for an upcoming stage play scheduled later that same year. Proof that ambition never fully faded, despite decades already spent inside the same demanding industry. From a repressed childhood split between real danger and real safety, through complicated relationships and 2 hard-earned Academy Awards, all the way to a quiet, decades-long friendship finally explained in full, the complete story stretches far beyond any single sunny television character ever could. Genuine growth apparently never really stops, regardless of age or how many awards already sit on a shelf somewhere at home, collecting dust after all these years. And regardless of how many decades separate a scared teenager from a celebrated elder stateswoman of American film and television. From a repressed Pasadena childhood to 2 Academy Awards and a friendship with Robin Williams that grew even more meaningful after that tragic loss, the real story of Sally Field turns out to be far richer than any single role ever captured on screen. Decades of honesty, resilience, and quiet reinvention continue shaping a career still very much in motion today, proving that real growth never really has an expiration date. What part of this story surprised you the most? Drop a comment down below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more real stories behind your favorite Hollywood legends.